Sir, that badge doesn't match our system. I need you to step away from the OR doors right now.
It's legitimate. You're welcome to scan it or call the clerk on duty. My credentials are on file.
I'm not comfortable letting you linger here. We can sort it out in the lobby.
Or you can check the surgical roster posted this morning.
Dr. James Webb had spent 15 years becoming one of the most decorated cardiothoracic surgeons in the American Southeast, Yale Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency, over 2,000 successful open heart surgeries, published researcher, keynote speaker at 3 international conferences, and on his first day as head of surgery at St. Catherine's Medical Center in Charleston, South Carolina, he was accused of stealing someone's identity, not by a patient, not by a confused visitor, by his own staff. Within 90 minutes of arriving at the hospital where he'd been hired to lead an entire department, Dr. James Webb was detained by security, interrogated in a storage closet, and threatened with arrest for impersonating a physician. His crime? Walking through his own hospital while Black. Before we continue, what city are you watching from? If this is your first time listening, support the channel by liking and subscribing. Stories like this need to be told, and with your help, we can make sure these events don't go unheard. This is the story of how institutional bias, unchecked assumptions, and the dangerous reflex to deny Black excellence nearly destroyed a man's career before it even began, and how the entire incident was caught on camera. James Webb didn't come from money. He grew up in North Memphis, Tennessee, in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than college acceptance letters. His father worked double shifts at a FedEx distribution center. His mother cleaned houses 6 days a week. But James was different. By age 12, he was reading medical journals he'd borrowed from the public library. By 14, he'd won a state science fair with a project on cardiac tissue regeneration. By 16, he had full ride scholarship offers from 4 universities. He chose Yale, not because it was prestigious, though it was, but because their pre-med program had produced more Black physicians than any Ivy League school in the previous decade. He wanted to see himself reflected in the profession he was about to enter. Medical school was brutal. The workload was crushing. The competition was relentless, but James thrived under pressure. He graduated in the top 5% of his class, earning the respect of professors who rarely gave praise and the envy of classmates who couldn't understand how someone from his background could outperform legacy admits. His residency at Johns Hopkins was even more demanding. Cardiothoracic surgery is not for the faint of heart. It requires precision, endurance, and the ability to make life or death decisions in seconds. James worked 100-hour weeks. He slept in on-call rooms. He missed birthdays, holidays, and his father's funeral because he was in the middle of a 12-hour valve replacement. But he became exceptional. By the time he completed his fellowship, Dr. James Webb had performed more complex surgeries than residents twice his age. His success rate was among the highest in the program. His research on minimally invasive aortic repair had been published in the New England Journal of Medicine. He was offered positions at 4 major hospitals. He chose St. Catherine's Medical Center in Charleston, not because it was the biggest offer, though the salary was substantial, but because the hospital had an aging surgical department in desperate need of modernization. They wanted someone who could rebuild the program from the ground up, someone with vision, someone with leadership, someone like Dr. James Webb. The hospital's board of directors had interviewed him twice. They'd flown him to Charleston for a tour. They'd checked every reference, reviewed every credential, and ultimately offered him the position of head of surgery. He accepted. He spent 2 months preparing for the transition. He sold his condo in Baltimore. He found an apartment 3 blocks from the hospital. He reviewed staff files, studied surgical outcomes, and drafted a 5-year plan to transform St. Catherine's into a regional cardiac care leader. On October 14, 2023, Dr. James Webb walked through the front doors of St. Catherine's Medical Center for his first official day. He wore a tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and his hospital-issued ID badge clipped to his lapel. He carried a leather briefcase containing his hiring contract, his medical licenses, and a folder of patient files he'd been reviewing over the weekend. He was calm, confident, ready. He had no idea what was about to happen. St. Catherine's Medical Center sits on a sprawling 20-acre campus just outside downtown Charleston. The main building is a 7-story structure of glass and steel, modern and imposing. Inside, the air smells like disinfectant and recycled air conditioning. The floors are polished white tile that squeaks under rubber-soled shoes. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. It's 6:47 a.m. The early shift has just begun. Nurses move quickly between patient rooms. Orderlies push gurneys toward the elevators. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeps steadily. Dr. Webb walks through the lobby with purpose. He's been here before, during his interview and facility tour, but today feels different. Today, he's not a visitor. He's the head of surgery. He has an office on the 4th floor, a team to meet, and a 9 a.m. department briefing to lead. But first, he needs his security access card. According to the email from HR, he's supposed to pick it up from the administrative office on the 2nd floor. He takes the elevator up, steps into a hallway lined with office doors, and follows the signs toward human resources. The hallway is quiet, too quiet. He passes a break room where 2 nurses are refilling coffee cups. They glance at him. One of them frowns. The other whispers something he can't hear. He keeps walking. 50 feet ahead, the HR office door is closed. A handwritten sign reads, "Back at 7:15. He checks his watch. It's 6:52. He has 23 minutes. He decides to walk the surgical wing, familiarize himself with the layout, maybe introduce himself to the early staff. It's what any new department head would do. He turns left, heading toward the double doors marked Surgical Unit, Authorized Personnel Only. He uses his temporary badge, the one HR emailed at him, as a placeholder, and the doors click open. The surgical wing is busier. Residents huddle near a nurse's station, reviewing charts. An attending physician barks orders into a phone. Somewhere behind the prep rooms, the faint hiss of sterilization equipment runs continuously. Dr. Webb walks slowly, observing. He notices outdated equipment, disorganized supply closets, a whiteboard covered in illegible handwriting. He makes a mental note. This place needs structure, and that's when someone notices him. Her name is Sandra Kellerman, 52 years old, charge nurse, 26 years at St. Catherine. She runs the surgical wing like a military operation, efficient, uncompromising, and fiercely territorial. She's standing near the nurse's station when she sees him, a tall black man in a suit, walking slowly through her wing, looking around like he's conducting an inspection. She doesn't recognize him, and that's a problem. Sandra prides herself on knowing everyone in this department, every surgeon, every resident, every tech. If you work here, she knows your face, your schedule, and your coffee order. This man, she's never seen him before. She watches him for 10 seconds. He stops near a supply closet, peers inside, then continues walking toward the pre-op area. That's enough. She steps away from the station and intercepts him near the scrub room. "Excuse me," her voice is sharp, authoritative. Dr. Webb stops and turns. "Yes? Can I help you with something?" She's standing with her arms crossed, chin slightly raised. Her body language is clear. "You don't belong here." Dr. Webb smiles politely. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Webb. I'm just getting familiar with the layout before my meeting this morning." Sandra doesn't move. "Dr. Webb." She says it slowly, like she's testing the words for authenticity. "I don't recall seeing you on the surgical roster." "That's because I start today," he says calmly. "I'm the new head of surgery." Her expression doesn't change. If anything, it hardens. "The head of surgery." "That's correct." There's a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. Sandra's eyes drop to his ID badge. It's a temporary badge, white with black text, no photo, just his name and the word administration. She doesn't believe him. "Sir, I'm going to need you to wait here while I verify your credentials." Dr. Webb's smile fades slightly. "I'm happy to show you my hire letter if that helps." "That won't be necessary, just stay here." She turns and walks briskly back to the nurse's station. Dr. Webb stands there, briefcase in hand, feeling the weight of eyes on him. 2 residents have stopped talking and are now watching. A surgical tech has paused mid-step, staring. He takes a slow breath. This is fine, he tells himself. It's a misunderstanding. She doesn't know who I am yet. Once she calls HR, this will be cleared up in 2 minutes. But Sandra doesn't call HR. She calls security. The security office is a cramped, windowless room on the first floor, tucked behind the main lobby. Inside, there's a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a wall-mounted monitor showing a grid of security camera feeds. Dr. James Webb sits in one of the chairs. He's been here for 11 minutes. Across from him sits Officer Dennis Howell, a barrel-chested man in his late 50s with a shaved head and a permanent scowl. He's wearing a St. Catherine security uniform, navy blue polo, black tactical pants, and a utility belt loaded with a radio, flashlight, and pepper spray. Next to him stands Sandra Kellerman, arms still crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Officer Howell taps a pen against his notepad. "So let me get this straight," he says slowly. "You're telling me you're the new head of surgery?" "I'm not telling you," Dr. Webb says evenly. "I am the head of surgery. My first day is today." "Uh-huh. And you just decided to walk into a restricted surgical wing without clearance?" "I have clearance. I used my temporary badge to access the wing." "Temporary badge?" Howell says it like it's evidence of fraud. "Yes, HR issued it to me until I could pick up my permanent security card this morning." "And where is this permanent card?" "I was on my way to get it when Nurse Kellerman stopped me," Sandra interjects. "He was wandering the surgical wing unsupervised, looking into supply closets, acting like he owned the place." Dr. Webb turns to her. "I wasn't wandering. I was familiarizing myself with the department I've been hired to lead." "So you say. So the hospital board says. I have a signed contract in my briefcase." Howell leans forward. "Then show it to me." Dr. Webb reaches for his briefcase. "Slowly," Howell adds. The implication is clear. Dr. Webb freezes for half a second, then slowly unzips the briefcase. He pulls out a manila folder and hands it across the desk. Howell flips it open. Inside is a 23-page employment contract, signed by Dr. James Webb and countersigned by Margaret Aldrich, Chief Executive Officer of St. Catherine's Medical Center. The first page clearly states, position, head of surgery, start date, October 14, 2023, salary, $487,000 annually. Howell stares at it for a long moment. Sandra leans over his shoulder, reading. The room is silent except for the hum of the monitor. Finally, Howell looks up. "Anyone can print a fake contract." Dr. Webb's jaw tightens. "Excuse me? I'm saying," Howell continues, "that just because you've got a piece of paper doesn't mean you are who you say you are." "Then call HR, call the CEO, call anyone in administration and they'll confirm my identity." "We'll get to that. Get to it now." Dr. Webb's voice is calm, but there's steel underneath. Howell doesn't like the tone. "Sir, I'm going to need you to watch your attitude." "My attitude? You're in a restricted area without proper identification. You're refusing to cooperate. I've shown you my contract. I've explained who I am. I've offered multiple ways to verify my identity. What exactly am I refusing?" Sandra steps in. "You're being defensive. That's suspicious." Dr. Webb stares at her. "You've detained me in a storage room and accused me of fraud. How would you react?" She doesn't answer. Howell taps his pen again. "Look, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit here while I make some calls. If your story checks out, you're free to go. If it doesn't, we're involving the police." "The police?" "Identity fraud is a serious crime." Dr. Webb exhales slowly. This isn't a misunderstanding anymore. This is an interrogation. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a dark, familiar thought creeps in. This is happening because I'm black. He doesn't say it out loud, not yet, but he knows, and they know he knows. Officer Howell steps out of the room to make his calls. Sandra stays behind, standing near the door like a guard. Dr. Webb sits in silence, briefcase on his lap, hands folded. He's been in high-pressure situations before. He's performed emergency surgeries with patients, coding on the table. He's presented research to hostile academic panels. He's navigated operating rooms where one wrong move could end a life. But this is different. This isn't about skill or knowledge. This is about whether they believe he has the right to be here. Sandra breaks the silence. You have to understand our position, she says. We've had issues with people impersonating staff before. Dr. Webb looks at her. Have you? Well, no, not here specifically, but it happens. Does it? It could. He doesn't respond. She shifts uncomfortably. We're just being cautious. Cautious, he repeats quietly. Yes. Tell me something, Nurse Kellerman. If I were white, would you have stopped me? Her face flushes. That has nothing to do with... Would you have detained me, accused me of fraud, called security? I would have done my job. Your job is to challenge every new physician who walks through your wing. My job is to protect patients. From what? A man in a suit carrying a briefcase? She opens her mouth to respond, but the door opens. Officer Howell walks back in. His expression has changed. The confidence is gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty. He clears his throat. So I spoke with HR. Dr. Webb waits. They confirmed that a Dr. James Webb was hired as head of surgery. I know, and that his start date is today. I know that too. Howell hesitates. They also said he's African American. The room goes very quiet. Dr. Webb tilts his head slightly. Is that relevant? Howell stammers. No, they mentioned it for identification purposes. Identification purposes. Yeah. Dr. Webb stands slowly. Officer Howell, Nurse Kellerman, let me be very clear about what just happened here. He speaks calmly, but every word lands like a gavel. I am Dr. James Webb. I was hired by this hospital 6 weeks ago to serve as head of surgery. I have a medical degree from Yale, a residency from Johns Hopkins, 15 years of surgical experience, over 2,000 successful operations, published research, international speaking engagements. He takes a step forward. I have done everything right. I have every credential, every qualification, every piece of documentation you could possibly ask for. Another step, and yet, within an hour of arriving at this hospital, I was stopped, detained, interrogated, and accused of being a criminal. He's standing directly in front of Howell now. So I'll ask you again, if I were white, would this have happened? Howell says nothing. Sandra says nothing. Dr. Webb picks up his briefcase. I'm going to my office now. I have a department to run. If you'd like to detain me further, I suggest you call your legal team first. He walks to the door. Sandra steps aside. He leaves without looking back. Behind him, Howell and Kellerman exchange a glance. They both know what just happened. And they both know it's about to get much, much worse. What Officer Howell and Nurse Kellerman didn't know was that every second of the interaction had been recorded. St. Catherine's Medical Center has 247 security cameras. 32 of them covered the surgical wing. 6 of them captured Dr. Webb's initial walkthrough. 4 captured Sandra Kellerman's confrontation. And 1, mounted directly above the security office desk, captured the entire interrogation in crystal clear 1080p. Hospital policy states that security footage is automatically archived for 90 days, accessible only to senior management and legal teams in the event of an incident. This qualified as an incident. By 10 a.m., the footage had been flagged by the hospital's risk management department. By 10:30 a.m., it had been reviewed by the chief legal officer. By 11 a.m., it was sitting on the desk of Margaret Aldrich, the hospital's CEO. She watched it twice, then she called an emergency meeting. The meeting takes place in the executive boardroom on the 7th floor. Present, Margaret Aldrich, CEO Dr. Raymond Foster, Chief Medical Officer Linda Graves, Chief Legal Officer Thomas Pryor, Director of Human Resources, and, reluctantly, Dr. James Webb. Dr. Webb sits at the far end of the conference table, still wearing his Navy suit, still carrying his briefcase. He hasn't said a word since entering the room. Margaret Aldrich speaks first. She's a woman, her early 60s, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She's been CEO of St. Catherine's for 11 years. She's navigated budget crises, malpractice lawsuits, and a devastating hurricane, but she's never dealt with anything like this. Dr. Webb, she begins, I want to start by offering you a personal apology. He doesn't respond. What happened this morning was completely unacceptable. You were subjected to treatment that was discriminatory, humiliating, and entirely inconsistent with the values of this institution. Still nothing. Linda Graves, the legal officer, jumps in. We've reviewed the security footage, we've interviewed Officer Howell and Nurse Kellerman, and we've concluded that their actions were inappropriate and potentially actionable. Dr. Webb finally speaks. Potentially actionable. His voice is cold. Dr. Webb, Aldrich continues, we want to make this right. How? We're prepared to offer you a formal written apology. We're suspending Officer Howell pending a full investigation. Nurse Kellerman will undergo mandatory bias training, and we'd like to discuss additional steps to ensure this never happens again. Dr. Webb leans back in his chair. You want to discuss additional steps? Yes. Here's a step. Don't racially profile your employees. The room goes silent. Dr. Raymond Foster, the chief medical officer, clears his throat. James, I understand you're upset, do you? Foster hesitates. I do. And I want you to know that as CMO, I take full responsibility for the culture that allowed this to happen. The culture, Dr. Webb repeats. Yes. The culture where a black doctor is assumed to be a fraud. The culture where credentials don't matter if your skin is the wrong color. That culture? Foster doesn't answer. Thomas Pryor, the HR director, speaks up. Dr. Webb, we want to be very clear. This hospital values diversity. We have policies in place. Your policies, Dr. Webb interrupts, didn't stop me from being detained on my first day. I understand that, but moving forward, Dr. Webb stands. Let me tell you what's moving forward. I'm going to my office. I'm going to do the job you hired me to do. And while I'm doing that job, you're going to figure out how to make sure this never happens to anyone else. He picks up his briefcase. If you'll excuse me, I have a department briefing in 20 minutes. He walks out. The door closes behind him. Margaret Aldrich leans back in her chair and exhales slowly. Get legal on the phone, she says quietly. We need to prepare for a lawsuit. Dr. James Webb did not leak the footage. He didn't have to. Hospital employees talked. And when word spread that the new head of surgery, a black man with impeccable credentials, had been detained and interrogated on his first day, people started asking questions. Someone in IT pulled the footage. Someone else made a copy. By October 18th, 4 days after the incident, the video was circulating privately among staff. By October 20th, it had been sent to a local journalist. By October 22nd, it was on the evening news. The clip is 47 seconds long. It shows Dr. Webb sitting in the security office, calmly explaining who he is. It shows Officer Howell saying anyone can print a fake contract. It shows Sandra Kellerman standing by the door, arms crossed, silent. And it shows the moment Howell says, they also mentioned he's African American. The footage ends with Dr. Webb standing and walking out. The video goes viral within hours. Dr. J. James Webb trends on Twitter. Local news stations pick it up. National outlets follow. CNN runs a segment titled, Head of Surgery Detained on First Day, Is This What Black Doctors Face? MSNBC invites Dr. Webb to an interview. He declines. The hospital's phone lines are flooded with calls, some supportive, most outraged. Protesters gather outside St. Catherine's main entrance, holding signs that read, Believe Black Professionals. Credentials don't erase racism, fire Howell and Kellerman. The story explodes, and St. Catherine's Medical Center has no idea how to contain it. 10 days after the incident, the hospital makes its first public statement. Margaret Aldrich stands behind a podium in the hospital's main conference room, flanked by Dr. Raymond Foster and Linda Graves. Cameras flash, reporters shout questions. We recognize that words are not enough. We must do better, and we will. The statement doesn't satisfy everyone. Activists demand Kellerman's termination, not just suspension. Former employees come forward with their own stories of bias at St. Catherine S. A class action lawsuit is filed by 3 black nurses claiming systemic discrimination. The South Carolina Department of Health launches an investigation into the hospital's hiring and personnel practices. And through it all, Dr. James Webb continues to work. He shows up every day at 6:30 a.m. He leads surgical teams, he reviews cases, he implements new protocols, he does his job, because that's what excellence looks like, even when the system tries to break you. On December 3rd, 2023, 7 weeks after the incident, St. Catherine's Medical Center reaches a settlement with Dr. James Webb. The terms are confidential, but sources close to the case report the following: a financial settlement in the range of $1.2 million, a formal written apology from the hospital's board of directors, mandatory bias training for all hospital staff conducted quarterly, the establishment of a diversity and inclusion officer position, a scholarship fund in Dr. Webb's name for underrepresented medical students. Dr. Webb does not make a public statement about the settlement, but his attorney does. In a press release, the attorney writes, "Told you Dr. Webb's goal was never financial compensation. His goal was accountability." This settlement represents a commitment by St. Catherine's to ensure that no other physician, no other employee experiences what he experienced. We are cautiously optimistic that the hospital will honor that commitment. Officer Dennis Howell does not comment publicly. Sandra Kellerman, after completing a 60-day suspension and bias training program, is transferred to a different department. She no longer works in the surgical wing. The hospital's diversity and inclusion officer position is filled by Dr. Angela Morrison, a Black woman with a PhD in organizational psychology and 20 years of experience in healthcare equity. On her first day, Dr. Morrison walks the surgical wing. She stops at the nurses' station where Sandra Kellerman once stood. She looks around, and she thinks, this is where it started. This is where we change it. On December 3rd, 2023, 7 weeks after the incident, St. Catherine's Medical Center reaches a settlement with Dr. James Webb. The terms are confidential, but sources close to the case report the following: a financial settlement in the range of $1.2 million, a formal written apology from the hospital's board of directors, mandatory bias training for all hospital staff conducted quarterly, the establishment of a diversity and inclusion officer position, a scholarship fund in Dr. Webb's name for underrepresented medical students. Dr. Webb does not make a public statement about the settlement, but his attorney does. In a press release, the attorney writes, Dr. Webb's goal was never financial compensation. His goal was accountability. This settlement represents a commitment by St. Catherine's to ensure that no other physician, no other employee experiences what he experienced. We are cautiously optimistic that the hospital will honor that commitment. Officer Dennis Howell does not comment publicly. Sandra Kellerman, after completing a 60-day suspension and bias training program, is transferred to a different department. She no longer works in the surgical wing. The hospital's diversity and inclusion officer position is filled by Dr. Angela Morrison, a Black woman with a PhD in organizational psychology and 20 years of experience in healthcare equity. On her first day, Dr. Morrison walks the surgical wing. She stops at the nurses' station where Sandra Kellerman once stood. She looks around and she thinks, this is where it started, this is where we change it. Dr. James Webb saved 17 lives in his first year at St. Catherine. MSS, 17 people who walked into an operating room with failing hearts and walked out with a second chance. 17 families who didn't have to plan funerals. 17 futures that continued because one man refused to let institutional bias define him. But here's what haunts him. He almost didn't get the chance. If Sandra Kellerman had been just a little more aggressive, if Officer Howell had called the police instead of HR, if the hospital had decided to protect its reputation instead of doing the right thing, Dr. Webb's career could have ended before it began. Not because he lacked skill, not because he wasn't qualified, but because two people looked at him and saw a threat instead of a doctor. That's the cost of assumption. That's the price we all pay when bias goes unchecked. And that's why this story matters. Because the next time you see someone who doesn't look like they belong, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO, or a janitor, you have a choice. You can assume the worst, or you can do something radical. You can believe them. If this story made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you question the assumptions you carry, good. That's the point. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Sandra Kellerman? What would you have done if you were Dr. Webb? And most importantly, what will you do differently the next time you're tempted to judge someone based on what they look like instead of who they are? Hit that like button if you believe stories like this need to be told. Subscribe so we can keep shining a light on injustices that too often go unnoticed. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because the only way we change the system is by refusing to stay silent. I'll see you in the next one.